Divine greetings. Thank you for joining another episode of Talks with Netrit Asset. This is part 6 of the Maat philosophy series, and hopefully we can get through the rest of the series in 4 more episodes. So tonight we're going to go ahead and jump in and pick up where we left off. We will start with Precept 17 and end with 22. And as we always do, before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and officially open with a libation. Tonight, I'm going to do things a little bit different. I actually wanted to do a more traditional Kemetic kind of libation, so I am going to incorporate that. Also, normally this show is live, but I've decided to try pre-broadcasting it and then uploading it. That way it can free up my time and I don't have to be stuck to the 7 o'clock hour. So if you're watching this, then you're watching a pre-recorded version of it and not a live this time. So we will see how this works out. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the libation. Nukseftetua im Nebuchadnezzar. I pour libation in honor of Nebuchadnezzar, the all-encompassing divinity. Nukseftetua im Atum Ra. Tua im Nekar Ich Nun. Tua im Nekar He. Tua im Nekrik Hehet. Tua im Nekar Kek. Tua im Nekrik Keket. Tua im Nekar Amun. Tua im Nekrik Amunet. Tua im Nekar Shu. Tua im Nekrik Tefnu. Tua im Nekar Geb. Tua im Nekrik Nut. Tua im Nekrik Aset. Tua im Nekrik Asar. Tua im Nekrik Nebehet. Tua im Nekar Satuk. Tua im Nekar Haru. Tua im Nuk Seftet. Tua im Nekaru Shil Pa Moya. For libation in honor of the Nekaru, or the deities of water. Tua im Nekaru Shil Pa Na'er, to the Nekaru of fire. Tua im Nekaru Shil Pa Hawu, to the Nekaru of air. Tua im Nekaru Shil Pa Ta, the Nekaru of earth. Nukset Ketua im Shepsu Aku. I pour libation in honor of the glorious venerated ancestors. A tap, a tap, a tap. All right, now we have officially opened by honoring the Creator, the all-encompassing divinity, and the various forms in which it manifests. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I will share my screen. All right, so again, this is part 6 of Maat philosophy, which is the study of the wisdom teachings associated with Maat. Tonight we will be going over Precepts 17 through 22. So let's start with Precept 17. Again, these are being read from the Papyrus of Ani. So there are different variations of the precepts And you will probably find out, if you don't already know, that there's quite a few versions floating around out there. And I had always wondered, like, how did some people derive at one set of interpretations and someone else at another? And so finally, I've taken the time to go in and do the interpretations myself. And I'm actually finding that things that were previously written are not correlating with what I've been translating. All right, and we'll see some of that tonight as well. We have an, which, if you've been following me for this series, we know by now is no or not. Met or mtmt, pry into matters, meddle, intrude, divulge. Ah is I or my. So another variation of this, I wanted you to be able to see it, because this is kind of like a cursive kind of, or shorthand version of the actual glyph. And sometimes it's hard to make out what's there, so I wanted you to be able to see it. So this is an erected penis. This is the bun denoting the letter T. And the penis is denoting the letter M. And this is actually the ear of a cow. And this is someone pointing to their mouth. So it's another variation of this same precept or the same writing. And in this case, even though it's a penis, it's not talking about something sexual in nature, which is one of the reasons why the penis isn't flowing or dripping semen. But it is denoting the forcing of something, or the intrusion, as we got at. So the translation that I have for this is, I will not, and of course we want to graduate to the point where we can firmly say I have not. So I will not pry, meddle, or intrude into matters that don't concern me or other people's business. A variant of this would be, I will not divulge information or speak of things that don't concern me. And that variation can be derived from another way that these words can be written, or this glyph, these hieroglyphs together can be represented. So again, I will not pry, meddle, or intrude into matters that don't concern me or other people's business. I will not divulge information or speak of things that don't concern me. I think that one was pretty straightforward. So I didn't create any supporting material for that. All right, Precept 18. An Shemra, to set the mouth in motion against someone, to speak evil, to slander, gossip, backbiting, character assassinate. I, me. I will not speak against others, as in gossiping, right? So I have gossip, slander, speak evil, backbite, or character assassinate others. So that's speaking to a specific type of troublemaking. We know that a lot of social ills derive from people doing these sorts of things, character assassinating, speaking other people's business, and things of that nature. So these are things that can definitely bring negativity into one's life and cause trouble and negativity to manifest in other people's lives as well. And so, of course, when we want to look at this from a societal and a social kind of setting, right, what's socially acceptable, we know that in American culture, and probably in many cultures that are being impacted or seduced by American culture, those types of things are actually desirable. People enjoy watching programs where people are doing those things. This is Wendy Williams, and she's made a living actually a really good living off of doing just that, right? Hollywood gossip, gossiping, finding the dirt on people and bringing it, to the public. And because of that, she's famous, but she's also attracted a lot of negativity into her own life because of her carrying out that precept. So again, we talked about in the beginning being aware of what we put out, because what we put out is going to eventually come full circle. And so that type of energy will eventually come back and hit home. So if you look at what's going on with her in her life and the things that she's gone through and put herself through, you can see a lot of it has to do with her um, getting back the kind of energy that she's put out into the universe. And so when we watch these television programs and we enjoy them, we just have to be honest with ourselves and say, hey, I'm supporting this kind of social behavior. It's something that even though it may seem like I'm not really contributing, yeah, I'm contributing to the ratings. And then also that type of behavior becomes subconsciously acceptable. And a lot of times, in a lot of cases, it becomes subconsciously a part of our behavior as well. And so it's not just Wendy Williams. We got the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and all these other housewives, right? I know for a while I almost got caught up in the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I mean, it's kind of compelling at first, but when you are sincerely trying to evolve spiritually, then you get to the point where these things actually start to become a distraction and noise, and you kind of like begin to look at it from a perspective of Maa't, and you realize that this isn't something that you really want to keep feeding yourself. But until you're ready to start making those changes so that you can begin evolving spiritually, just be truthful with yourself. Just say, hey, I'm watching these things. I'm contributing to the isfet and the chaos. Basketball Wives, and it's just not these shows. There's so many shows like this where the theme is backbiting, gossiping, cheating, all of that stuff. And it's just not women, because we get a bad rap. Men try to make it seem like, oh, that that's a woman's thing, but it's not. I mean, we've learned a lot actually from men, and I know there's many of us who have watched or seen or heard of the Game of Thrones. Yeah, that's the name of it. And there's a lot of that backbiting and underhanded, backstabbing kind of behavior going on all throughout this movie. And a lot of it is being acted out by men. And I mean, you can really learn a thing or two if that's what you're into, trying to develop that negative skill set. All right. So we have precept 19. We have an, which is no, not sakun, curse, ill wish, wrathful, angry, furious, passionate, short tempered, hot tempered, impulsive, hot headed. Ah, as, that is, huh, over, kate, or kate, objects, possessions, wealth, riches, points, facts, business. And I just want to say I do my best with the pronunciations, but by no means am I even trying to allude that I am mimicking how they were pronounced in Kemet. I mean, there's different people that argue different premises about this. Some people lean to different phonetics from other languages. But the truth of the matter is, you know, we don't really exactly know how things was pronounced phonetically. So for me, it's just a best effort. I will not fight, be short-tempered, angered, impulsive, furious over objects of possession or differences of opinions regarding points, facts, business, etc. A variation of this would be, I will not angrily dispute over things of a fleeting nature, right? That's a good way to put it all in one sentence. And so we've had other precepts talking about anger, right? Just avoiding being angry. And we talked about how there are some people primed to respond to challenges in the world from a place of anger. I'm me being one of them, and I've had to work very arduously at working on that, and I continue to work on it. This particular precept is speaking about really being attached to objects, right? You know, being easily pushed, right, to become violent, to become angry, to become spiteful, all of that stuff over possessions, right, is being specific here. But not just possessions, but also other things like points. You know, people argue all the time over opinions. You know, being a hot-headed person, I've lost friends over, you know, not meeting eye to eye, right, over differences of opinion. You know, people argue facts. You know, one person believes that they have the fact of the matter and someone else feels that they have the fact of the matter. So this precept is kind of like telling us to do what I think Les Brown kind of like said. I think it was Les Brown that said, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff, right? So this is really helping us to keep our mind on learning how to become detached from those things that are fleeting, right? Those things that cannot help us evolve spiritually, those things that we cannot take with us into the next life, right? So why let those things take us off of our center and make us angry unnecessarily? And we know that we are living in a society that is plagued with people losing it. People get cut off in traffic, right? I saw a few years ago there was a truck driver. I think it was in Atlanta, where he got cut off by a person driving another vehicle, and ended up getting out the truck and shooting this person. I've had situations where 18-wheelers wanted to come over, and I didn't realize that they were planning on trying to force their way in front of me, and they just decided to come over anyway. And I had to literally like move out the lane and honk my horn and stuff like that. And there's situations like that where people just lose it and they actually take another person's life. And I wanted to share this story because when I came into this story, into awareness of this story some years ago, it really hurt me to find out that a 15-year-old young lady lost her life over a bottle of orange juice. And so if you're not familiar with this story, Latasha Harlan's, she was in a grocery store, and the owner of the store claims that she was sticking an orange juice in her book bag, and the store clerk or the owner, she actually shot her in the back of the head over a bottle of orange juice. So when we hear about stuff like that, it's not just that precept by itself, right? It's not just about someone being attached to objects, right? This woman apparently felt like orange juice, a bottle of orange juice, was more precious than the life of a young African American girl. Would she have done that if she was in her own country? Or would she have done that if she was in a neighborhood where the people that came into her store looked like her? So when we see a lot of this stuff happening now, we also have to take into consideration the social climate of this country in particular, and how it's created all of these negative stereotypes and negative feelings that people have towards one another without even knowing the individual, that allows them to feel like objects are more important than the life of someone else. So we have a lot of work to do as a collective and as individuals. Here's another story of a 16-year-old who was arrested in a fatal shooting over a raffle dispute. So apparently they both had something was going on. I don't remember the whole story now, but there was something involving a raffle over some sneakers, and in that dispute, this young man here lost his life. I mean, that's really interesting. It wasn't even, it was over the possibility of winning something. you know, that's even, that's even worse. But that means that we have to figure out how we can start getting people to respect life again, right? And a lot of that has to deal with us having to find ways to impact one another socially, and rejecting music, movies, all of the things that are socially acceptable that continue to promote violence and make us callous towards death. Those types of things, we have to begin to say we've had enough of it. Excuse me. All right. Precept 20. On, no, neck, copulate, I, hemti, or hemet, wife, woman, ta, man. And so this precept and the next precept, 20 and 21, and the books that I have read, the translators considered this one and the next one to be a duplicate. And we'll talk about that after I go over this one. So I put here has another implication and nuance from other depictions of a man. So let's read the translation first. I will not copulate with a wife of a man. I will not have sex with another man's wife. So that's pretty straightforward. But I wanted you to see how the word man is depicted here. It's a waterfowl bird. I think it's a gosling. Some people want to say it's a duckling. But it's a bird that is symbolic of monogamous relationships, right? Because most waterfowl, they actually mate for life, and they're symbolic of like the family, like the male and female work together to protect and take care of the little ones and things of that nature. So there's so many ways to depict a man. And so when I looked at this as Ta, and in order to try to get a better understanding, why didn't they just put the glyph of a man? Like there's one that's similar to this that clearly is a man, and they chose to do this. It helped me to understand what 21 from my perspective was saying. I don't believe that the Camus or it describes would have duplicated a precept. That wouldn't make sense. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, I don't understand the significance or the nuances or the differences, but to just write out, say that it's a duplicate, from my perspective, it's disrespectful, to the writers. It's it has a Uber's kind of feel to it to say it's just a duplicate. So I wanted you to see 20 and 21 side by side before I go ahead and translate 20 and 21, because this could possibly be the first time that they're being looked at and translated as something other than a duplicate. I'm not saying that someone else out there has not done that. I'm saying the major translators in the books that I've come across, I have not seen it done. And because of my own personal attachment to the Neteru and to Kemetic spirituality, for me, I just was like, it can't be a duplicate. There has to be some more time and energy put on it. And so after meditating and reflecting and really spending time looking at it, I noticed that there are some differences. And so the first difference is the principle that each precept governs. So this is a male principle, and this is a female principle. There is a slight difference here if you look, right? So this is again a cursive. So it's like a shorthand version of the Egyptian vulture. And in this one, it's not there. So one could argue, well, when it's phonetically kind of like spelled out, it still comes out to ta. But if this is TA and this is TA, and as well, this not really changing it, then from my perspective, that means that this is there to kind of like emphasize something. And so we'll talk about that as I go on. But I just wanted you to see that from my perspective, it's not a duplicate, but there is a slight nuance. And so we know that in our culture and in other cultures, we have the double entendre, which is a word or a phrase that has one innocent meaning and one risque meaning, right? Or it could be, we have words and phrases that have two different meanings, things that are spelled the same, words that are spelled the same, but have two different meanings, right? Depending on what context it's used in. So I just wanted to say that we have that in our language. It exists in other languages, but if you're not a part of the culture, you kind of like can miss the nuances. Someone has to explain it to you, right? If you don't know that someone saying he's so hot also means that they're physically attractive, and someone's saying that to someone in the wintertime, and you're like, I don't understand. So you have to have it explained to you. And so therefore I took the approach of, well, there has to be another way to approach the 21st precept to try and get a deeper understanding, or to the best of my ability, get into the mindset of the Kamau by my understanding of their culture. And of course, it's limited. It always will be. And so with that, again, taking into consideration that there's a feminine principle at play here, I still translate it as an nek hemti or hemeti, wife, ta, man. And so for me, the translation with the feminine principle is, I will not be copulated by a man who has a wife. I will not have sex with a man who has a wife. And one of the reasons why I felt like this was added was to further imply that this is a particular type of man that we're talking about. We're talking about a family man. And that's because this Egyptian vulture, it has symbolic meaning as well. Now, some translators feel like either the glyph is going to serve have a phonetic value, or it's going to have a determinative, or it's going to imply a meaning. But I find that when I work with the hieroglyphs, that sometimes I feel like both is taking place at the same time. I don't think that it's always either or. And so I want to talk a little bit about that Egyptian vulture. Um, it's a symbol of sanctity. And when I started really investigating this vulture, I kind of like tried to see myself immersed in ancient Kemetic culture. And if I grew up as a child and I learned that this is not only the ah sound, like the first letter of the sound of the alphabet, or represent what we consider an A, but I learned the attributes of this bird. I mean, it looks very regal. It looks very upright to me. It's just very, straight. And I know that they didn't just arbitrarily plug that particular bird into the hieroglyphs like that. So I thought about it, and I, started getting into the feeling of this particular animal. And these are the things that it represents: righteous, upright, divine, honorable, moral, ethical, right minded, upstanding. So Egyptian vultures are monogamous, migrating between breeding seasons as a pair. They build a large nest and will constantly replenish it during the breeding season. The male and female both feed their chicks until they fledge, 70 to 85 days after hatching. So that's just a little bit about this particular vulture, the Egyptian vulture, that I found very interesting, and it kind of like helped me to again get a better feeling for the word ta in that particular um, precept. And so I felt more like it was speaking of this man who would be a husband, or a man, a family man. And so that's how I came to bring it to this, right? I will not be copulated by a man who has a wife, or have sex with a man who has a wife. And we know that this is very much important, because you can't have one precept without the other. You can't say, don't sleep with wives, right? Don't sleep with another man's wife. But it's okay, for someone to sleep with a woman's husband. They both will cause detriment in the family equally. Also, I tried to imagine what it was like culturally um, during the time when these were written, or just throughout Kemetic culture. And traditionally, in most African cultures, people were married, right? You didn't have this large percentage of single people that stayed single, all throughout their childbearing days, and things like that. So in a lot of cases, people were married. So you didn't really have, it was like, well, if most people in the neighborhood are married, and you're cheating, either you're gonna be sleeping with somebody else's wife or somebody else's husband, right? But now we live in a totally different society where there's people who prefer not to get married, but have no problem with copulating, or having sex with someone that's married. I've actually I've known people that was their way of life. I've actually separated myself from people who I once considered friends, because they willingly played that role. I've had women tell me they only sleep with married men, and things like that. So because this is now part of the social climate, right? It's socially acceptable. And we know that the society is suffering because of it, right? It's one thing if you're not married and you doing whatever you're doing, but it's another thing when you're married. And going back to the first glyph where it had the little gosling, right? Thinking about the family structure. In most cases, people marry and have children. Even if they don't have children, it's just another factor to take into consideration. But when people vow to be faithful to one another and with one another, it's extremely painful. And we go back to that weeping precept. It's extremely painful when a spouse is cheated on. It's better to leave the spouse, separate, divorce or whatever, and do what you need to do. And then maybe if later on you regret it, it's salvageable. But that precept is really warning us against something that causes a lot of pain and suffering in society. A lot of times when it's done to people, it affects the way that they relate in other relationships. It's been done to me. I was married with 5 children, and all I wanted was a family. And having to deal with infidelity, it not only broke me in terms of my sense of self-worth, my sense of trust, and things like that. It was extremely devastating on the children. Because at the end of the day, if there's children involved, their worlds are going to be forever impacted by it. I mean, divorce is something that is very traumatic for children. We take it for granted because we think that children can survive everything, but we have a lot of adults. I'm including myself in that are still struggling with picking up the pieces from something that seems to be so simple, right? This simple precept. And again, that's why I'm really emphasizing on it, because I had to go through this with my own children, and becoming a single parent because of the repeated infidelity was something that altered my life in a very drastic way. And it made life very, very challenging for not only myself, but also the children. And this is the case for a lot of children. So adultery remains one of the most common reasons that lead to divorce. And so the society doesn't make it easy, right? Even if you are trying to be monogamous, right? Especially for men. But like women are catching up according to the statistics that I came across, but especially for men, because a lot of the commercials and things that we see that use sex to sell stuff are really targeting men, because an ad like this isn't going to make me want to go get this sandwich, blow one and swallow. I'm like, ew, right? But for some reason, they believe that, if you target, excuse me. But for some reason, they feel like if they target men, I guess maybe men will drag the woman along and get them BK Super 7-incher, right? They're not even really being coy about it. It's kind of like in your face, right? The perversion and the, using sex to sell sandwiches. She'll tell you size doesn't matter. She's lying, right? I mean, I don't even watch television, so I haven't seen commercials in years, in all honesty. So when I go and I pull some of this data, I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. But so those of you who watch television, you watch commercials, you see what they're programming us with, right? You see what's going into subconscious mind. And this kind of stuff is going to keep men preoccupied with sex, and women to some extent. So this makes being in a monogamous relationship even more challenging and more difficult when everywhere you turn, right, you're being reminded of the perversions, how to be sexually free and tempted. I mean, they're using it in everything, right? American Apparel. And again, some of the things that I saw, I was just like, these are real ads. Like nobody said thank you, but no thank you. Like there's no one complaining. I mean, we have social media now, and I'm like, I know I've complained when I was watching television. There was a commercial that I found to be really sexually over the top, and they were actually playing it during prime time. And I complained, and some other mothers complained as well. And they actually took the commercial off. So again, just little ways that we can do our little part when we see stuff like this, especially when we have children and our children seeing stuff like this. We can drop a line, right? Send a letter, make a phone call, do something. Wow, can't get enough veggies. I'm like, this is what they're doing now to sell vegetables. Okay. All right. I just want to have a little fun with that. So, society is not trying to help keep marriages together, right? If we didn't get that from those advertisements, we got it now. So, we have to be more vigilant. If we are in relationships, we have to understand the importance of honoring the relationship. And we looked at those precepts, and it had this energy of monogamy, of family, woven into those precepts. So when we begin to, again, take these things to heart, it becomes easier for us to have a filter in our mind when we're being tempted to break the precepts. All right, our last precept for tonight. An teta or dada. Mishandle, misuse of sexuality. And that covers a lot of ground. And I'm sure this varies from culture to culture and from time period to time period. And today, living in, the equivalent of a Sodom and Gomorrah, I think I talked about that in the last episode. There's a whole lot of perversion that's going on. And this particular precept is like a net, right? It is trying to catch all that stuff outside of what's already been spoken about. So we have rape, sodomy, pedophilia, bestiality, perversion, promiscuity, excessive masturbation, or preoccupation with sex. We have promiscuity twice. There you go. Necrophilia, etc. And using sex in ways that cause harm to yourself and or others. So I wanted to highlight that because this isn't about, again, someone sitting in the sky or heaven watching you and getting upset with you, right? This is teaching us the basically, in essence, right? We talked about reaping what you sow in the beginning when we were talking about Maat. And so this is a part of that. It's explaining that when humanity lowers their vibration to the level of this, where this is becoming the norm, then we have the society that we have today. And there's so much perversion and so much sexual abuse going on in the world today. And a lot of it has to do with those companies, those organizations that utilize the desire for sex to sell anything from cucumbers to hamburgers. And so again, we have a right, especially as stewards of Maa't, to find ways to combat these things. And again, it's not about going crazy, but it's also not about just sitting back and letting any and everything happen without challenging it. We have to, if we don't challenge it, who will? You see what happens when no one challenges things, it gets out of control. And so it's so out of control that, I mean, I could spend another several hours just highlighting the ways in which it's out of control. But I'm just going to use a few points to bring it home. So we're going to go all the way to the top, right? The top of the culture, right? The Catholic Church is basically the epitome of American religion, right? It's at the helm, and everything else kind of like trickle downs from it under the Christian kind of umbrella. And so if you go all the way to the top, most of us are familiar with the pedophilia in the church. And pedophilia sounds, it sounds almost like such a okay word, but it's child rape. You know, these people are raping children and ruining their lives, and nothing's being done about it. In the most recent development, a damning inquiry found that some 216,000 children in France have been sexually abused by members of the clergy since 1950. And that's just what they could dig up, what they can get people to report on. What about all of the things, you know, all of the ones that go unreported? And we hear about these scandals that pop up in the news every so often. Does anyone go to jail? Right? Is anyone even ousted from the church? So if it's acceptable all the way at the top, then it's no wonder, it's no mystery why we have so much child sex abuse in this culture, right? We have children, sex pornography, things like that. There's a whole market for all of this perversion, because who's teaching society these precepts? Who's making sure that everything that we create that's going to affect us subconsciously is honoring Maat? In ancient Kemet, that's how things was done. And that's how people subconsciously lived in accordance to, or had less challenges living in accordance to Maat than we do today. And like I said in previous shows, this is what's causing us to crash and burn. Not having Maat anywhere near the cultural norms. Sex trafficking, right, in the United States. It's estimated that between 15,000 and 50,000 women and children are forced into sex slavery in the United States every year. And that number is argued by some to be very low, right? There are some people that argue that the number is closer to 240,000 to 325,000, right? And I know that this number is low when I just look at the number of missing women in the country, right? We have more missing Black women in the country than 50,000 that just never show up, never turn up. But yet when you watch movies like Enemy of the State, and that movie is over a decade old now, where they show you how they have satellites, they have all these ways that they could track people's movements and see what criminals are doing, but yet they can't stop this sex trafficking in the United States. Of course, there's no desire to, because some of the biggest supporters are people in powerful political positions, right? Because the APEP, the ISFET, the chaos, the unrighteousness, the demonic behavior goes all the way to the top. And so it's time for the top to fall. It's time for the unrighteous to lose power and make way for the righteous. And if that wasn't enough, right? We have all these women being sex trafficked, but you know, perversion has no limit. Here's an article that I found: Jungle's Sixth Secret, horrifying tale of prostitute orangutan who was chained to a bed, shaved daily, and forced to perform sex acts on men. Right? This article, I'm reading this article. I read this article, came out on September 14th this year. Chained to a wall and lying on a dirty mattress with a full face of makeup, Pony the orangutan waited for her next client. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's crazy. I mean, the creator must be like, what? What is going on? These people are losing it. So again, the society, the social norms, right? Again, Maat is nowhere to be found. And so this is what we get. Bomb squad called to ER after man arrives with cannon shell stuck up his butt, right? This sounds like some kind of weird, sick tale. This is true. This guy, how he got there, I don't know. But, right? Nothing else to say about that. Woman who married dog 8 years ago says he's perfect for her, right? She's not the only one. I talked about this before. There's several women marrying their dog and having sex with their dog. You know, I grew up in New York, and growing up, we had heard about 42nd Street at the time, and it wasn't rumors. It was told. It was people knew that, like, there was a certain section on 42nd Street that was filthy and disgusting. And I walked down there going to a movie theater at night, and you could just feel the level of degradation. But they had all types of bestiality going on that street. I would hear how a woman would go in and get paid to have sex with horses and go out on stretchers and things like that. So these things are really happening. And again, the question is, who's standing up for Maa't at all? Luckily, that street eventually got cleaned down or cleaned up. So I don't like just, talking about negative things. I also like trying to provide ideas and ways for us to start contributing, right? Like when we talked about landfills and polluting the land and things like that, something as simple as being cognizant and caring about recycling, right? That's a little way to help. But I think it's important for people to be able to spot the signs of human trafficking. If this is something that you are interested in, if this is some small way that you want to contribute, I have read about this, so I'm cognizant when I'm out shopping, especially at Walmart. They tell you that there's certain places where a lot of this stuff happens. So I'm actually keeping my eyes open and being vigilant to make sure that no one's being snatched up or human trafficking right next to me or near me. But if we don't have our vision tweaked to look for these type of things, we just won't even see it. So I encourage anyone who's interested in becoming aware of some of the telltale signs to go to this website, hopeforjustice.org, and just read on the signs, just things to look for. And then there's ways that you can call, numbers you can call 911, but there's things that they tell you that you can do to assist. I also want to talk about some child sexual abuse. Again, looking at the precepts regarding adultery and that being the leading cause of divorce and children being raised by single parents, I wanted to share this with you all as well. There are more than 42 million survivors of sexual abuse in America. 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18. 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18. 1 in 5 children are solicited sexually while on the internet before the age of 18. 30% of sexual abuse is never reported. Nearly 70% of all reported sexual assaults, including assaults on adults, occur to children aged 17 and under. 90% of child sexual abuse victims know the perpetrator in some way. Approximately 20% of the victims of sexual abuse are under age 8. And this is the part that is extremely important to me, and I want to share with everyone. 95% of sexual abuse is preventable through education. And this is a website that you can go to, www.d21.org, and learn how you can be an advocate without having to do much except understand the signs of child molestation, or signs of a possibility where children can be molested. So we always can find ways to incorporate Maat in our lives, and in society if we so choose. So I wanted to share some of the sexual abuse warning signs. So if you have access to children, or you are around children, it's good for you to be aware of these signs so that it don't go undetected. So physical signs, signs of trauma to the genital area, such as unexplained bleeding, bruising, or blood on the sheets, underwear, or other clothing. Behavioral signs, excessive talk about or knowledge of sexual topics, keeping secrets, not talking as much as usual, not wanting to be left alone with certain people, or being afraid to be away from primary caregivers, especially if this is a new behavior. All right, very important. I was told not to leave my children anywhere they don't want to go or want to be, and I did that. Regressive behaviors or resuming behaviors they had grown out of, such as thumb sucking or bedwetting. So it's like regressing. Overly compliant behavior. Sexual behavior that is inappropriate for the child's age. Spending an unusual amount of time alone. Trying to avoid removing clothing to change or bathe. Emotional signs. Change in eating habits. Change in mood or personality, such as increased aggression. Decrease in confidence or self-image. Excessive worry or fearfulness. Increased or unexplained health problems, such as stomach aches and headaches. And we know that you want to see that in addition to some other signs. You don't want to just jump to conclusions if you see that going on. Loss or decrease in interest in school activities and friends. And again, these could be symptoms of other things, so it's always good to start making inquiries anyway. Nightmares or fear of being alone at night. Self-harming behaviors. And so the most important thing to keep in mind is that you're looking for sudden changes, right? Because some of these things, like I said, they could be an indication of something else. But we want to be caring enough and concerned enough to even be able to discern when any of these things are starting to happen, right? A lot of adults are so busy being adults that they don't really have compassion or time or care to watch out for the children. Back in the day, we all looked after one another's children and children in general, right? We came from a tradition of it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to protect the child. So just some things that I wanted to share to kind of try to make a societal contribution in whatever way I can. All right. So the last takeaway is that family structure is the most important risk factor in child sexual abuse. Children who live with two married biological parents are at a low risk for abuse. The risk increases where children live with step parents or a single parent. Wow. So it all ties in, right? Our ancestors knew what they were doing when they were writing those precepts. And it's undeniable that the world has gone to hell because we have not entertained those precepts on a societal level, on a social level, and by and large on an individual level. And with that, I say big dua to you all for watching. I hope that this has in some way been impactful. The goal is to promote Ma'at in whatever capacity I can, and hopefully everyone who watches these are inspired to do the same. I send each of you Ankh, Uja, Seneb, Life, Vitality, Health. I also send you Mer, Aki, Hetep. That's love, joy, and inner peace. Hetep.